How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Lucky Trader NFT Show. I am Preston Johnson, your host here in the Bets TV studios. Special guest today, we have Nigel Eccles. Some of you probably know the name, one of the co-founders of FanDuel, who has taken an interesting pivot in this weird world we live in 2021 now towards Web3. He has a few ventures that he's working on right now. And we're going to just kind of discuss where he sees things going here in the future, what he's planning to accomplish and solve, and how he can use his past successes at FanDuel and just his kind of startup life in general, even pre-FanDuel, and apply them here in the Web3 space so we can all learn from it. So with that being said, we're not going to wait. We're going to bring Nigel right in. Whenever you're ready, Nigel, how are you doing, man? It's good to have you on.
Hey, great. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Like I've the way I explain it to people in the industries, at least I've been in, it's NFT, Web3. If we're looking at a Venn diagram, it's sports betting, it's daily fantasy sports, and Nigel Eccles is like right in the middle. You have the circle right in the middle. So I'm not sure how, but you've just like crushed it in all mediums. But for those that aren't aware with who you are, they're not really familiar with your story, just give us a couple minutes on your background and kind of how you got to where we're at now.
Yeah, so I've been involved in online sports betting for over 20 years. A lot of you may be familiar with the company Flutter Entertainment. I was actually a product manager at Flutter in 2000, and actually relaunched Flutter as a betting exchange. And that was in 2001. We ended up merging with Betfair in 2001, 2002. And then was at Betfair for a while. But the name Flutter Entertainment actually comes from this company I worked at back in 2000 called Flutter.com. After that, I stayed at Betfair for a while. Pretty familiar with it. Helped it sort of relaunch. Well, not relaunch, but rebuild its interface. And actually, if you look at the interface today, somewhat embarrassingly, it's actually exactly the same interface as we put in place in 2002. Oh, wow. Some tweaks here and there, but it was really built for horse racing, and you can actually still see that very much in the interface. So I like to say good job, because clearly they didn't feel any need to change it. Or the flip side is that, maybe they're a bit of slow and innovating. I left there and joined another betting exchange called BetDEX, which was a basically number two competitor. Relaunched it in 2003. It ultimately sold to Ladbrokes. Never really had the big impact we thought it could do. Betting exchanges is about liquidity, and by the stage that we launched 2003, Betfair had a lot of liquidity. Also, there was some product issues, and we probably underinvested on the technology side. That was 2003. Then in 2007, I actually started a prediction market. It was called HubDub, similar to, if you remember, Augur, but this was pre-crypto. So this was using kind of an online currency, play money. And then that became FanDuel in 2009. So we, after a year and a half of building this prediction market, we had a good user base. We had a lot of people who loved the product, but we didn't really have a business model. And so we sort of said, look, we as a team are good at building online games. We know that sports is our biggest category, even though we hadn't really focused on it. And we also looked at fantasy sports, and we sort of thought we were kind of outsiders to the industry. We didn't even play fantasy at the time, and we just sort of thought it was strange that people would be playing this game that took like 4 to 6 months to figure out who the winner was. And the prizes were like, a couple $100. And we were like, well, what if we made the game a lot faster and we made the prizes a lot bigger and we put it on your phone? It was like a really simple thesis. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what we built. I guess a lot of people on the show will know FanDuel. But those early years, the early couple of years was quite hard, right? A lot of the formats hadn't been invented. Like FanDuel, the name, comes from the fact that our very first game is just a 2 players. Head-to-head, and so it was a duel between 2 players. We then added 5 and 10 player teams, or our leagues. We then added tournaments. We then added 50-50. So those were all innovations that came a lot later, sort of like even sort of 2 years down the line. And then we kind of developed that it was like a fully mobile experience. That also took a couple of years to build out as well. We scaled that, and then around just actually when we were in the run up to selling to Flutter. That's when I left FanDuel to focus on one of my current companies, which I can go into.
Beautiful. So one thing I remember from some other interviews I've heard you on that I wanted to just bring kind of some context to people. It's so simple, but also simplistically brilliant, because you don't have a background, you're not American, in like American fantasy sports and how that like whole culture was. And so you bring up the point, like people are playing for 4 to 6 months for a couple $100. Like it's like $1 a day, and they're spending a couple hours a day on fantasy football lineups. Like this makes no sense. Why don't we have something that we can do daily?
Yeah, we looked at it and we were kind of like, we looked at fantasy sports and we thought, this is the most monetized product I've ever seen. Like, what other products do you spend so much time on, get so much value from, and you pay almost nothing for? Yeah. And we were like, that's crazy. Like, the amount of people are, engaged in this, they're willing to spend money on it if, for the level of value and fun that it delivers. And that was our idea.
It was perfect. Well done there. Congratulations, obviously, in order for that. Let's just move right into it then. What's the main reason you've kind of taken this pivot towards Web3 and NFTs in this space?
Yeah, so I've now got 3 different companies. I can try to talk to them, and 2 of them are heavily in Web3. One of them is in sports cards, but is exploring Web3 and is actually going to do some things in Web3 pretty soon. So that company is StarStock. I'm actually in their offices at the moment. It's a sports card trading marketplace and live breaking site. So actually, they're doing their very first live auction tonight, actually simultaneously with this. So what you can do with StarStock is we have about nearly 2 million cards, or 1.5 million cards in our vault. It allows people to trade those cards, but they can, and very much like they do on eBay, but the cost is like 5% per transaction. We find a lot of people, when they're trading them, they don't want them shipped. So they can buy, wait for a price movement, and then flip it. And then secondly, what we do a lot of, you can see it brought up here, a lot of, you can see live auctions just being advertised there. The second thing that it's doing now is live case breaks. So you can go in, you can drop $200 or to $10,000, and we'll do a live break online. We'll open your pack of cards, show you what cards you have, and sometimes you get hits. And then tonight, you can just see there, we're launching auctions. So you can just go in, the dealer will hold up a card, and basically you're in a live auction. It'll last 60 seconds. Last person to bid wins. So that's where StarStock is. We've sort of explored a lot of work with NFTs because the cards are the kind of the original analog NFTs. And so some of the formats you're seeing here, we think could work really well with NFTs. So that's something we're exploring.
Awesome. And if you want, then let's just get into BetDEX and Vault, which I'm guessing when you refer to 3, those are the other 2.
Yeah. The other 2 are
break them down for our listeners
BetDEX
and viewers.
Yeah. So the second one, which is firmly in NFTs, is Vault. So it's actually a pivot of the company Flick. That's what I left FanDuel to do 4 years ago. And we spent several years working with creators to try and help them create. What we wanted to do with them is, a lot of them were just sick of the social media treadmill, like just continually having to push out content every week. And what they wanted to kind of create a small group of fans, like their most passionate fans, and then monetize them directly. And we thought, hey, this is a really cool opportunity, kind of like Patreon, but we wanted to have a real platform, so that Patreon really, at the time, and still kind of today, is kind of like a Porsche paywall. It allows you to do payments, but it wasn't really a platform for content. And so we thought, okay, if we can create a platform for content that is exclusive, like an exclusive club, then that'd be a really great way to monetize your top fans. Turns out that was really hard. And actually turns out that the thing that was really hard about it was kind of missing, and that was really crypto. Because what we discovered is that NFTs is an amazing way to do that. And so earlier this year, we started working on building that, but building it using NFTs. And what we discovered was that when we talked to creators here, was that they were really excited about NFTs. They were like, this is incredible. I can actually, and the thing that they loved about it was kind of interesting in that, like, they loved a lot of the aspects that we love about NFTs, But one of the things as a creator they loved was they loved the idea that they would build something and then they would sell it. So they would move off that treadmill. Like no creator wants to be continuing having to push content out every day without taking a break, because they know that, you know, the quality of the content goes down and creator burnout happens. The creator cycle is much more about, you know, actually building something, selling it, and then, like, you know, chilling out for a bit, thinking about your next project. That's how you get really good content or really, really good quality, you know, art. And so that's what they loved about NFTs. But what we found was a lot of the artists who weren't graphic artists looked at NFTs and said, this is great, I'd love to be able to do this, but my medium is music, or my medium is photography, or my medium is, and what they sort of said is, I love NFTs, but it's not authentic for me to work in graphic art. A couple of musicians did NFTs earlier this year. And I think if you look at the secondary market of those NFTs, they've not performed. So two pointed as an example is Steve Aoki and Grimes, both very successful musicians, but they are seeing their NFTs dropping something like 60-80% in the secondary market.
Interesting. So what I think is interesting about Vault in general is ultimately what you're getting at and trying to solve is the power that it offers artists, musicians, just creators in general. How do you convince a new artist or a new musician or someone that Vault's like the platform for them? Like, what are some of the perks, I guess, or the specs that can kind of convince them, like, hey, because it's over the head for so many creators. I have friends that are musicians that ask me, and it's just like, they don't want to bother. They're hesitant.
That's like, and so there's a couple of ways we're approaching it. So, you know, the last bit of how Vault is different from traditional NFT is the way we work is we allow creators to create a vault, and you could think of that as a Dropbox. And what they do is they mint keys to that vault. And so say they mint 1,000 keys, only 1,000 people can see what's in that vault. Then the creator can then add content or digital media to that vault. So that can be pictures, that can be video, that can be music. In fact, we're building a music player into the app. And then the fans, only the ones that actually have those keys, can actually see that content. And so very interestingly, when we started talking to musicians, one of the things they immediately thought about was, say, I'm going on tour early next year. Why don't I say to my fans, 1,000 of you can come on tour with me. If you buy a key, then actually watch, you know, you can actually see content from each of these concerts as I go around the country. So maybe the band's not coming to your city. You can actually see that content over a 2-3 month period. And that content, if that band blows up and is hugely successful, imagine being one of these people who owns a key to one of their very early concerts. That would be enormously valuable. And because the key is an NFT, it basically means that you can resell it. And so you can invest in that band and you can resell it if you're right.
I love it because it's like customizable fan engagement. And my background, actually, because of my dad's a composer, so I grew up in the music industry. How cool would it have been for me to be right about so many rookie cards as forms of bands or artists that I never actually got paid dividends for? Well, in this sense, you have a friend or family member or just an artist that you find really that doesn't have a following, and you have one of their rookie cards, so to speak. Like, I think it's brilliant, and it takes collecting some more, you know, paths and just avenues than cards or sports or some of those other.
That's absolutely right. It creates a sort of asset that is kind of like their rookie year as such. Like another one, interesting, even within sports, like we obviously look at the rookie card as the, you know, that's the kind of gold. But, you know, interestingly, if you look at like college and even high school athletes that are becoming hugely famous, we're talking to a lot of them and saying, look, your first year, like your first season, imagine you created a vault and said only 1,000 people get to see, you know, the picture video from my first season, that vault. That would be, and if they go on to become, you know, the next, you know, first round pick, that vault becomes really valuable.
I'm not sure if you saw, I hadn't gotten there yet. And when you said that, and I got giddy as like like you hear about people that, you know, verbally commit to a certain college when they're 13 or 14 years old, right? Like a stud quarterback or NBA player that's going to whatever high school that's going to be the next LeBron. That's amazing. I hadn't even gone that far. Let's stick on Vault for one more question, and then we'll get to BetDEX because that's more my personality anyway and my background in betting. But I'm intrigued more by Vault for what it's worth, just because I think there's so much opportunity for creators, artists, musicians, like you alluded to. Here's my question. I was going to save it for the end, but I think this is a good time. I heard you on a separate interview in the past. Was it HubDub, I believe you said, in 2007, you ended up starting. At that moment, though, I think you alluded to you had a family, you had just bought a home and had a mortgage. You were more or less doing a 9-to-5 type job.
Yeah.
And you had to decide, like, I want to go the entrepreneurial life. And you made that jump. And I've seen, and I have this kind of running thesis that we saw the last 25 years with Web 2.0, that all these people have, done startups. A lot have had success. They've left other opportunities to try something new. I think the Web 3 opportunity is going to be like 10x that, if not more. And there's so many people I've already seen that went to university and studied a certain industry, have worked for 10 years, 15 years in that industry, and are leaving to do Web3 and NFT stuff. There's also a lot of people that are trying to decide if they should. So can you at least just like look back on yourself? If I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, but the 2007 Nigel Eccles, should I go into this startup life? So many people are going to be facing that question, I think, now. What guidance or advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so like I think the first thing for me is that, like, not everybody should be an entrepreneur. Like, not everybody. Like, I don't. It's been very good for me, and it was absolutely right for my my own risk tolerance and my just like my own what I enjoy doing. But I know plenty of people that do not. Like, one of my older brothers is an airline pilot. He's loved flying since he was 15. Actually, funny, he's been quite an entrepreneur on the side, but he loves his day job, and it would be ridiculous for him to quit to Web3. So it's really not for everyone. I think everyone has to decide what career path they want to follow. I do know that whenever I quit my 9-to-5 to go and sort of say, hey, I'm going to do the startup and I'm going to go raise money, it was a pretty terrifying moment, because it was like a huge leap into the unknown. Like, I knew I had 12 months, and if I didn't raise money in 12 months, I was in deep trouble. And I think actually it took something like 18 months, and I was very, very heavily in debt by the time we did raise money. But I knew that I deeply wanted to be an entrepreneur, and that I was going to risk everything to go and do it. And I was still, at that point, I felt pretty early in my career. So I do think with Web3, it doesn't have to be as big a leap, because you can actually get involved in projects without leaving your day job. Like, you can, get into DAOs, you can do real work, get an understanding of how it works, get a skill set that it would have been much harder to do when I started my sort of career, like sort of HubDub we started 14 years ago. That wouldn't have been an option. Like, you could have done stuff in the margin, but it couldn't have been like a real business or a real organization. That's much easier today. And so you can kind of test the water and do that for several months before saying, okay, actually, this is a real thing, before leaping into it.
I appreciate that honesty. One, it isn't for everybody. I think you nailed that part for sure. And I think it's great advice. I've found myself telling some artists a similar thing where, hey, the only downside to trying some stuff from the NFT space or Web3 is your time. It doesn't really cost a lot to try some stuff out as a creator and still do your in IRL, in real life stuff on the side. And eventually, if it makes sense to make the jump, then you can. But it's manageable, I think, to at least do both and then go from there. I've found myself doing a similar thing with, formerly being a TV analyst for ESPN, doing sports, to like, hey, I need to have more flexibility to spend some time on the NFT side. And I was able to kind of, combine both. And I've loved it. This year's been fantastic. Let's get in then talking sports betting a little bit. Tell us about BetDEX. You alluded in the beginning, you were talking about how the problem with exchanges is a liquidity issue. How does BetDEX try to solve that? Why do you think you guys can? And congrats, I think recently you guys raised a bunch of money. So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so betting probably like kind of spinning around in my head for maybe 15 years. Ever since BetDEX like really failed to take on Betfair. And I guess over the last 10 years in particular, I certainly felt that Betfair failed to innovate. Like I kind of was joking at the start that we did a great job 20 years ago, and that's why the interface hasn't changed. We didn't do that great a job. Like I just feel that this is a monopoly in it, where a bit like eBay, where it's been so successful, got such strong network effects that even though a product like say Smarkets, which is a competitor betting exchange, much better interface, like much more modern product, really fails to compete with it because it doesn't have that liquidity. And so over the last 10 years, I've always sort of thought, well, what would be a way to really to compete with that liquidity? And then the other thing that has always really struck me is, honestly, the industry is built for where larger than crapware. Like, these are not like great betting platforms. I'm not going to name names, but like sure. The reason we're not seeing all the innovation on top, which we should be seeing, like when we look at other tech industries like social media or even like search, like we see innovation every year. We just take it for granted. Like Google just changes and it just knows what I want whenever I search for it. These are just innovations that have come on top. Betting products have seen, like, I would say in the sports betting market, we've probably seen like 3 significant innovations in the last 20 years, and those are bet changes, those are in-play betting, and those are mobile, maybe cash out. But these are, that's it. And one of the reasons we see so much betting advertising is whenever you're advertising like 2 products that look almost identical to each other, the only way to get somebody to come from product B is just to like hit them with more and more advertising and hit them with more and more bonusing. Yeah. In tech, generally, you don't see tons of advertising. You don't see Google advertising because they have got an amazing product. And so that was another thing that's just really struck me the last 10 years is like, why is there not more innovation? And the reason that I decided we weren't seeing innovation is everyone was dealing with the sort of base layer of crap, for want of a better word, like, per payment systems, per wallet products, like, so, and additionally trying to wire all of these things together, which can take multiple years in order to get there. And so it's not criticism. There's great engineers working on this. So, FanDuel alone, we had 500, I think we have something like 500 engineers, like several hundred engineers when I was there 4 years ago. Some of them, some of the most talented engineers I've ever worked with, but, they spent like 2 years building a wallet product. So that was kind of like a big challenge for me. And I'm like, well, okay, how do we bring more innovation to this industry? And so really this year, and over the long time, I've been sort of looking at crypto and say, could crypto be the answer? And looking at Project Augur 2017, looking at Ethereum, and what I saw there was it's really promising because it offers this idea of a decentralized betting exchange. But the problem is just being transaction speed and transaction cost. And so, like if you use Ethereum today, you can see the cost, you can see the speed. Betting, average bet size in the US today is about $25. And, well, in the US, it's probably only 20 to 25% is in play, but in Europe, it's like 70 to 80%. So you can't have like a 15-minute, confirmation time. You've got to have it in like instance. And so what really kind of turned this thing from an idea, a concept, this year was Solana. And when we saw the Solana L1, we're like, whoa, wait a second. Here's a blockchain that delivers me all of the power of Ethereum, but it can do it lightning fast at fractions of a cent. And so then we looked at that and said, we can do an on-chain betting exchange on Solana. And a reference point for that is Serum, which was built last year, which is a on-chain centralized limit book, order book model. And what that means, there are different clients built on Serum. When somebody puts an order, that order goes on chain and can be matched by an order from one of the other clients. And so Serum itself is a decentralized exchange, which we really haven't seen being successful in any other blockchain.
So what the bettors out there are curious about is like what's the VIG like, right? And so for people that aren't familiar, the benefit of an exchange, even outside of a decentralized one like BetDEX, is for pros, they can often get a cheaper price than minus 110, right? Most people that aren't familiar with betting, you're not risking 100 to win 100. You're actually risking 110 very often to win 100. You have to win 52.4% of the time, more or less, to break even. But in exchange, sometimes you can get minus 105, minus 106, even sometimes lower. And what's good for recreational bettors is they're going to, at least it's a hobby anyway, they're going to entertain themselves and their money's going to last longer, right? It's not just going to disappear quickly because they're not laying minus 114 or whatever it may be. So what's that going to look like with BetDEX? Have you discussed it? And what do you think will happen there?
So we've not made final decisions on it, but we can give you some sort of guideposts. So let's look at the industry today. So FanDuel in last quarter was about 8%. The U.S. industry runs at about 7 to 12%, depending on the market, etc. In Europe or in Asia, you're seeing books running at about 5%. And so, if you just think back and imagine this was imagine you were on Robinhood and they were charging you 5% per transaction. That's what they're doing. Just in sports betting, that margin's hidden because all they're quoting you is the amount you're paying and the prize you win, but that margin is very real. And that's why even if you're 50% better, you're in 50% bets, you get it 50% of the time. At the end of the season, you're down 80% because that's all been eaten up by their margin. So that's a sort of a centralized sports book. A centralized exchange like Betfair will operate on about a 2 to 5% margin. So, dramatically better. However, if we look at a centralized crypto exchange like an FTX or Binance, they operate on about a 0.2 to 0.3%. In fact, on FTX, if you're creating the bet, if you're creating the order, they will pay you. So they will pay you. I think it's like it's 0.1% to the creator, the sort of a market maker in effect. And so they are actually seeing a magnitude better deal than what we're seeing in sports betting.
I like how you didn't say exactly what your plan is, but that should be good news for everyone that is actually interested in placing bets on BetDEX down the road.
And the thing is, and the other reason that we can charge a dramatically lower percentage is, let's just think about this. I just sort of talked about FanDuel having about 500 engineers. I don't know their exact number today, but that's probably a good ballpark. And what do they do? Well, I know part of that team spent a long time building a wallet, right? And a couple of years building state-of-the-art wallet, really impressive. And a big chunk of the team work on DevOps, and they build all the infrastructure, and they work with Amazon Web Services to do all of the provisioning, etc. They also work with the whole settlement side of the business to kind of make sure that these bets all settle. If you compare that to what we're doing, so we're building this on Solana. So this BetDEX will be built on Solana. So where's our Amazon Web Services? Well, that's Solana. That they are going to carry the heavy load there. What about the wallet? Well, if you're interfacing with Solana, you're using probably Phantom, maybe Soulflare, one of the other wallets. We don't have to build a wallet. Our wallet, the amount that we have to do is literally 3 lines of code. So you compare that 3 lines of the code with 2 years work in terms of building a wallet. And you see the massive unfair advantage we have that we don't need it. Just to give you an example of how different Web3 is from Web2. So Flutter, parent company of FanDuel, has got 5,000 engineers, right? Pretty big company. FTX, if you're into know them, so they are the second largest, I think they're the second largest exchange, or maybe third largest on a bad day. They do about 30 billion a day in transactions. Guess how big their engineering team is? Flutter has got 5,000 engineers. You'd think FTX must have a massive team, right?
It must be less.
It is less. But what'll shock you is how much less. They have 7 engineers.
7.
They have 7 engineers.
I was going to guess a few hundred.
Yeah. The entire company is 120 people.
He's a genius, man. Okay,
And
hold
it's
on a
funny,
second.
like,
Okay, go ahead.
what's that?
Finish your
Well,
thought.
the joke in crypto is very much like, to talk about the number of engineers you have, like as a high number, is a very Web2 way of thinking, because in crypto, we are building stuff that's blocks. BetDEX, and we'll come into this. We're not building all the applications are going to be on this protocol. We're about building the protocol. Other people are going to be building these applications on top, which means that we can keep our team small and we can keep our costs low.
It's just such a more efficient way to build things. It's an interesting way to look at it, where normally a team would want to show off and say, hey, we have this many devs or engineers. You want to be able to say, hey, we know how to maximize the tech that already exists and go from there. And actually my producer, Ham, he's on the show, he's listening in, but he sent me a question over the weekend as well, which ties in, because I think with the current climate with Solidity and some of the other languages for Web3 that devs are either learning, or there's just not enough with the amount of projects that are being built. Can you speak a little bit to the current climate then for back-end and front-end developers? Is it getting more competitive to hire, retain them? Just speaking from your experience in the last few years.
Yeah. So, it's funny. I've heard it's harder to hire developers every year for the last 14 years. It's like, it's kind of a truism, right? And in particular, if you want to hire like top decile developers, they're really hard to hire. It's not surprising. Demand for developers has just gone up. And so that's why, if you want to be, and we always talk about being a developer destination, you have to focus on delivering what developers really want. And what do developers really want? Well, number one, they want to work on really cool technology, right? That's why they became an engineer in many instances, because they love and they like using the latest technology. Number two, they want to work in an environment where they really love working with their colleagues. It's supportive. It helps them develop as an engineer. And so you have to really deliver that. And number three, actually, one of the things engineers do like working in is small teams, right? So somewhere where Web3 has this real advantage. Anyone who's been in an organization that has really scaled, like FanDuel has done, knows that as you scale bigger and bigger, you get more and more politics, you get more and more, like, productivity just goes down. And so you really get a huge benefit from keeping your team small. You get much higher productivity, and you get much better team environment. And so it's one of these things. It's like an unfair advantage that you get the ability to work with a really small, great team that is very, very highly productive. Oh, so in terms of, and then in terms of hiring people into Web3, because this is a big question I get, which is like, how do you hire, Rust developers? Like a joke is, well, I want to hire a Rust developer who's got, 5 years Solana experience. Well, Solana's only been around for a couple of years. And the answer is you don't. You hire really good engineers, because really good engineers can program, can learn their language. In fact, they get great value in going over, well, I used to be a C++ engineer, which is quite like Rust. And then they can transition over to Rust. So that's, that's just kind of like, that's become accepted in Web3, that, you don't look for Web3 engineers, you look for really good engineers who want to make that transition.
So let me see if you can speak to this. I know it varies by developer. I've heard, and I've actually started telling developers I know, like, hey, at least start trying to learn Solidity or Rust, whatever it might be, because I've heard that, like, if they really focus for like 3 months, like you're alluding to, like, it's not that hard to pick up. If you're already a good dev and an engineer anyway, give it a couple months. And I still think, obviously, the need for anything Web3 related with those languages is going to be massive. So is that, you think that's about right from people you've worked with, or at least heard?
Yeah. So the engineering team that I've worked with on that transition path, and ones who've gone on that transition path, I think they would say the first few months of working on it is pretty challenging, because you're sort of learning the base structure of blockchains and how they work, and coding in that. But then it gets much faster. The other thing which is interesting is, even though you're working at a Web3 company, a lot of times the work you're doing is exactly the same as Web2. So for example, Vault is building on Solana. We're using something called Metaplex. And so Metaplex actually abstracts extracts away the sort of base protocol development from our engineering team. So our engineering team actually don't really have to do much Rust development at all, because they're using protocols that are already built on that on Solana.
That's beautiful, man. I'm so excited for all of this stuff. Let's just hit on a couple more macro kind of general concepts, and then we can let you go. We've appreciated your time. What do you think is like the biggest obstacle right now that I think like, you know, that's hindering mainstream adoption? Like, what can we do to fix that as people that are already kind of ingrained in the space?
Yeah, crypto's still hard. You know, like that onboarding experience is like, even like telling someone that here's a seed phrase, and if you lose it, you're locked out forever. It's kind of like, it's not built for consumers. And that's problematic. You know, self-custody, which I do and I hold standard, I'm not sure works for everyone, or certainly doesn't work for everyone in the current tools. I think Phantom has done an incredible job at building a really, really consumer-friendly wallet, but it's still pretty hard to get someone to kind of understand what's happening. I'd say something, this is a very simple one, which is the notifications on failure in crypto are horribly engineering written. You know, like they're an engineer error. You know, error 317 happened, bad thing. You know, like and then you Google money, and you're like, what happened? You know, and it actually crypto, and I encourage people, like, you know, I'm like, look, it's, you know, oftentimes things get stuck or you don't know what happened, but that doesn't mean your money disappeared. Like it's usually fairly fault tolerant in that way. But it's pretty terrifying, people coming in for the first time, actually kind of touching their money and moving it. And so we need to make that process better. We need to make wallets better. I think there's definitely, there's a lot more work we need done there. I think we need to do a lot more design. So a lot of designs of these products are as if they were designed for machines to work with, and so not humans. And I'd say an example of really good design, so Phantom is certainly one, but Orca is another. So, you know, swapping liquidity pools is not a liquidity pool topic, but Orca have done a really nice job at actually making it more user-friendly. So I think across Web3, we need to get more designers in it, to the extent that when we were at Breakpoint 2 weeks ago, I had a joke with my team and I said, whoever finds a designer, I'll give you 1,000 Samo. And it wasn't like hire a designer, just like find one. And the entire trip we met one. So there was a designer there, but it's very, very engineering heavy, which it needs to be. We need the infrastructure to be built. But to bring consumers in, we need more designers in there, just to kind of make it much more consumer friendly.
I think you put that.
And then just to say the third part, you know, to bring on consumers is we just need more consumer products. Like, you know, it's NFTs has been this kind of breakthrough consumer product, but, you know, I would struggle to name like 5, like really, you know, that if I was to kind of explain to someone crypto why they need to have crypto outside of NFTs and speculation, it's kind of hard. It's like, well, you should buy this because, or you should get into crypto for this like non-speculative reason. Like even NFTs is largely around speculation. And so our excitement around building Vault and BetDEX is that they're not necessarily for crypto users. Like, you know, for Vault, it's like, if you're a fan of Taylor Swift, if we get her on the platform, you're going to want to see what's in that vault. And with BetDEX, you might not care about crypto, but you would like to bet and not get totally ripped off by the bookmaker, in which you want to bet on a client that's built on BetDEX. So that's kind of the idea, that we build more products that really are just for consumers and not for, you know, not for the sort of existing ecosystem, which really is largely built around speculation.
I think that's the perfect way to attack, if you're a creator, entrepreneur, whatever, this current climate in the market, because things have kind of gotten stagnant to an extent, especially with just all these NFTs that are pure speculation community. Like, I hope I can flip this and it works out.
Yeah,
not really there, right? And so I know.
Yeah, it's very vibrant though. Like, yeah, keep going.
I was just going to say,
Well,
you're
it's just
familiar with
I'd
the
say
project. Sorry, you got it. Take it from here.
yeah. So I'm just saying, like, I find NFTs this year to be very vibrant. Like, it's not like, there was a launch and then the format didn't evolve. Like, the format did evolve. Like, we had like Top Shot at the start of this year, really blew up. We had some of the art NFTs like Nifty Gateway. Obviously, they fell away, but the PFPs came in, and now I think we're going to see more utility NFTs. So I think we're seeing an evolution of it as people sort of say that's got old. What's this new thing? We saw it with Loot, which I thought was a fascinating project. We're seeing the Wolf game, which is again another fascinating one. So I think it is unlocking creativity where people realize they can't just do another version of that one that people did 2 months ago. They've got to evolve quickly. Otherwise, it's just going to be considered like out of date.
So let's leave you with this then. We referenced NFTs. Obviously, 2021 was crazy. What do you anticipate 2022 is going to be like?
So, like, certainly what I hope and what we're building is that, is that we become much more mainstream. Like, to give you a number, YouTube has got something like 1.5 billion monthly active users. Twitter has got about half a billion. OpenSea, which is the number one NFT platform by a significant margin, has got 300,000. So, like, we have got, like, this whole industry has got a tiny fraction. And like, if there was 10,000 random YouTube viewers on here, on average, none of them would have an NFT. So that's how kind of early we are. And so next year, what I'd like to do is get from the average of none to get to an average of like 20 to 30 as we go more and more mainstream. But I think to do that, we need to give NFTs and we need to give crypto more utility that isn't just about speculation. Like, I love speculation. I think it's great, but I want to see us actually build more products that actually make more sense to somebody who's like, they're buying it for its intrinsic value or it gives them some real world.
Perfect. I think that's the direction things have to go. Otherwise, if it's just some speculation asset for a couple of years, the mainstream is never going to come over. And you're right about, I think, onboarding. The tech needs to be better. Design needs to be smoother. I think the Orca actual tagline is a DEX for the people, not programs, something to that nature.
Yes.
And that's like exactly what you were alluding to, where let's make things easier and let's add a little more utility and like substance to the practicality of what NFTs can be in Web3. Nigel.
And awesome. Orca is a good example, co-founded by a designer, and it just shines through the product. So, and we need to see more of that.
We do. Designers out there, call up Nigel.
Yes.
Call me up even.
Come to Web3.
Yes, we need your help. We'll make it happen. Nigel, any last thoughts you want to share anywhere people can find you? I think your Twitter handle is just at Nigel Eccles.
Yeah, I'm at Nigel Eccles. I'm a monkey. You'll see me now. I'm largely on Solana. So both the projects I'm working on are being built on Solana. So I'm a huge fan of Solana. I'm a huge fan of Samo. So if you're needing another dog coin, get on the Samo coin. It's going to be, and I've convinced Varun, who's is the CEO of BetDEX, that we have to take bets in Samo as Solana's resident ambassador dog coin. So that's kind of some of the things you'll see. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that's some of the stuff that I'm interested in.
Look, it's smart. Everyone needs a dog coin. I love it. Nigel, thank you so much for your time. We'll be in touch, and thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks, Preston.
Yep, take care. Nice. Ham, I know you were sitting back. You're enjoying the feedback, listening to the wisdom. Any first thoughts, impressions? We're not going to take too much time. I know we don't try to go over an hour total for the show anyway, but I think he sees, obviously, that he's brilliant anyways, and like all his paths he's gone down. But the main thing that, and a project we can't talk about publicly, but that I've been trying to build and work on, is exactly his point about you can't just do the same thing again. That's a speculative, like you might get a hoodie in the metaverse in a couple of years on your digital metaverse guy, character, or girl. Like, let's do something that actually helps the mainstream audience understand how to bridge those two sides of things and why NFTs and Web3 and blockchain is powerful, he's solving that with Vault, big time, BetDEX for bettors and just, prediction markets. That's what stood out to me as an exciting, like, hey, we have people out there. It's going to take some time. Everyone wants the quick, get rich quick thing. It's probably not going to exist for a while. Like, let's wait for the real builders and visionaries to do that. And, we got to be a little more patient than I think most people like. Anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. First of all, Nigel hit on so many points that really demonstrate how ingrained he is in Web3 and how much he understands what's going on in the space right now. Definitely makes me bullish Solana because,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely right. Like myself, you, I can't speak for you, I guess, but a lot of people that I engage with, we're kind of like Ethereum NFT maxis, We're like, oh yeah, crypto punks are the grail, and then, on Ethereum, that's the way. But in reality, the functionality isn't there when you're trying to build a different kind of platform like he is. So he's gone with Solana. And the question about developers and the availability of engineers, like that blew me away, how few you need.
Me too. I had no idea.
And it makes a lot of sense because when you're building on a tech that's already been developed, the wallets, the transactions, all of this, it's already there. That removes a lot of burden on the company. And that's something I didn't even think about until today.
It's pretty funny, actually. Like seriously, if there's a new project that's like we have hundreds of developers, it's like you're not doing things correctly. Like it's inefficient. How many guesses would you have needed to say that FTX has 7 developers?
I would have never guessed
That's insane.
There's no chance. And like I keep thinking about, oh, this is like a rate limiting step in the space is the developers. And then he also pointed out that, people don't have years of experience in blockchain tech, right? You just have to find a good developer who can learn it quickly. And that's what's going on. So that makes a lot of sense. And, also just in general, Nigel, if you think about what he's been up to in his career, there's different types of entrepreneurs. Now he's saying, entrepreneurship isn't for everybody, but the type of entrepreneurship that he's involved in, I mean, he's swinging for the fence.
High stakes, yeah.
He is swinging. This guy's a home run hitter, and he comes out the gate here with 2 other ventures that are absolutely at the front edge of what's happening here. Yep. Like, so this is really interesting. I wish the best for him. We'll definitely be following along. I didn't get to show the BetDEX, so let me just...
Yeah, sure. Throw it up there.
Let me pull that up here just so people can get that in there.
I know they're hoping to launch beta early 2022. There's no set date or anything. You go to the site, it's just pretty much information, but it explains its value and the value of Solana, especially for something like betting markets where you want to be able to do it at basically no cost and multiple transactions in fractions of seconds. So, yeah, people can check it out there. And look, I thought it was fantastic. Appreciate his time again. He even gave you some love for Wolf Game.
Yeah, it sounds like we're playing Wolf Game.
Everyone's
together.
playing.
Oh, man, that's a whole nother conversation.
We'll do that show tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll be back. No, thank you, Ham. Appreciate you coming in. And thanks again to Nigel. And thanks to the Lucky Trader NFT for setting that up. Just awesome stuff. As usual, at Lucky Trader HQ is the Twitter handle. You can check them out there, or luckytrader.com for their platform. Just dig in. More and more people I see, I say this, they're not paying me to say this. More and more people that I know aren't coming from like the fantasy sports with Jennings and Bales and like the crew that are setting this up are screenshotting, like they're using Lucky Trader, the platform, to share thoughts on Twitter, and like it's becoming more mainstream in that sense. And so just all the congratulations to them too.
Yeah, I actually need to credit Lucky Trader. There was a NFT drop, Smilesverse, a week or so ago, and as soon as it dropped, people are looking for rankings. As soon as the metadata was revealed, we want to know what's rare. I'm looking around, I'm on the Discord, I'm trying to figure out what's what. Sure enough, Lucky Trader got the rankings up. They were the first platform that had the rarity rankings for that NFT up.
Did that pay off?
Yeah, I mean, it helped.
You were able to at least swipe a few that,
Yeah,
that's
no
good.
question. So that was pretty cool.
Hell yeah. Nice, man. Cool. We will be back next week. No more weeks off, hopefully, for a while. The NFT show brought to you by Lucky Trader and Bets TV. We'll catch you guys then.